Now I would like to move on a little bit more onto the issue of human rights education and rights promotion. It is indeed one of the functions under the promotional mandate. And for example, the UN Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training recognizes that NHRIs can play an important role, including where necessary coordinating role in promoting human rights education and training, awareness raising, and mobilizing relevant public and private actors. This also implies that the NHRI can encourage state actors to develop effective policy, strategy, and so on. But this said, and that's also very crucial, even though the human rights education is a core, one of the core functions under the promotional mandate, it cannot be, let's say, seen at expense of NHRI being a protector of rights. And it is clear that a good human rights education is a combination of education and training with more legal policy and for those NHRs that have the mandate, also the investigative work. And then indeed leads to increased impact and effectiveness in overall mandate of the NHRIs. I have briefly mentioned before the Belgrade Principles. What I find interesting in relation to the Belgrade Principles is that the kind of human rights education element is embedded in there, which allows a lot of maybe room for reflection, considering that if certain advices giving to the policymaker in the parliament are simply not taken up for political reasons, etc., one may even consider to explore it with the human rights education mandate. Now, of course, a point was made about the political setup that needs to be a favorable political setup, but sometimes the human rights education approach, when combined well with the advice and protective role. So what do we do, for example, on the front of if there is an MPM mandate with an NHRI, and then how that feeds into different human rights education work, that is something to consider. I have picked on 3 examples. I've already spoken about Finland, so just very briefly, it is a country which has a very serious approach to human rights education, which actually affects all levels of education, is very well advanced. You may know it, so I don't want to spend too much time about that, but it is a model to look into if one would consider to approach it more from a systemic point of view, leading towards a national plan of action, which would also include a key component for human rights education from different education levels. So that's just one point. Another 2 examples I'd like to showcase is one is from Slovakia, because it combines really well sort of an entry point to schools, but also engaging with private companies. And indeed, businesses could be one of the less usual suspects and an ally in promoting human rights. And the Slovak National Center for Human Rights has conducted specifically trainings that we're also targeting private companies, which is in long run, it turns out well in terms of being able to have a more broader platform to communicate rights, to strengthen rights awareness, but also to increase reach out. The final example that I like to mention, the Northern Irish Human Rights Commission, which is doing well, in my opinion, the kind of combination of protection and promotion mandate, making the point that they are not doing just human rights education in an abstract setting, but they are rooting it in their casework and in and target actually government departments, civil service, and also civil society. So that is an example to look into as well. I just want to briefly mention and make the point about the importance of communicating what we do in the area of human rights education. I find two examples quite striking, just to highlight one similar initiative, which is a TV show called Bürgeranwalt, which is something like an advocate for the people, where the ombudsman speaks and responds to real life complaints. And this is then screen on public TV. Again, in my view, combines well the kind of educational element and the kind of protection mandate of the NHRI. The second one comes from Poland, and perhaps the most, let's say, interesting example in terms of reach out, which other NHRs have also done, but there has been a steady presence of the office at a very famous music festival. That is turning into an interesting happening, and maybe through this way of reach out also increases incredible, let's say, awareness of the office work. I will only look back at my slide concerning the awareness of NHRIs and say that Poland has 93%. So, it is an interesting point to consider.